Hello, my name is Hayley Marie, and in this tutorial I'll be guiding you through 3 different watercolour techniques and showing you a few ways you can approach painting with this beautiful flowing medium. One of the things that I love most about art is that there is no right or wrong way to express your vision. As you explore these techniques, you might find that you naturally lean towards one style more than the others, and that's perfectly okay. This is all about experimenting, discovering what feels right to you, and building your confidence, so let's get started and enjoy the process together. To explore these techniques, we will be painting a Caladium leaf, a perfect subject with its vibrant colours and beautiful shapes. We'll approach the painting in 3 different ways using layering, wet on wet, and negative painting. Each method will give us a unique result and help you experience the versatility of watercolour. Before we get stuck in, I am going to show you a quick example of each style so you have a better understanding of each. Let's start with the layering. What I'm going to do here is apply a thin layer of watercolour and allow that layer to completely dry. Once dry, I am then able to add the next layer. You can repeat this process over and over until you have your perfect finished piece. Up next, I will be showing you the wet on wet. Here I am applying water to the rectangle, and then I will be adding red and green and then trying to mix the two together to create that blended look. Lastly, technique 3. This will be the negative painting. For this, I almost have to paint backwards. What I mean by this is that you are creating shapes by using a darker watercolour around the lighter areas of the painting. When looking at each technique close up, you can see on the layering that adding each layer, whether it's with the same colour or different colours, you can add depth and really show more and more details. Layering different colours can also change the tone of the painting. With the wet on wet, you can achieve a really nice soft blend. And then finally, you can see here that we have created a flower by painting with a deep green around a floral shape for the negative painting. Now, let's talk about the materials that we will be using today. We have the Princeton Oval Wash Brush in a 1/2 inch, the Princeton Round in size 4, and the Daler Rowney System 3 brush in size 0. I will be using some Winsor & Newton watercolours, the Viridian Green, Emerald Green, Hooker's Green, and Light Hooker's Green. Then the Permanent Rose and the Crimson Hue. I also have the acrylic gouache from Holbein in Shell Pink and Super Opaque White. Now that we've done a quick overview of the 3 techniques and discussed the materials that we will be using, it's time to start our Caladium leaf study. I've grabbed a HB pencil and some paper to do a quick sketch of the leaf. When sketching the shape, start by drawing a heart-like outline. Once you've completed the outer shape, move on to drawing the central vein. Begin at the top and work your way down to the point. Then add branching veins coming off the central one, like I'm doing here. Next, add some small white circular dots for extra detail, mimicking the natural speckling of a caladium leaf. The colours of the caladium leaves can vary, but for this tutorial we'll focus on a green outer edge, red middle section, light reddish pink veins and white speckled dots. To get consistent outlines, I'll be using my light box to trace the same shape onto 3 pieces of A6 mixed media paper. A light box is super handy for this kind of task. You can find one easily on sites like Amazon. I've linked the one I use in the description, along with all the other materials featured in this tutorial today. Once all 3 outlines are ready, I'll paint the base layers using the 3 different techniques we discussed. After each base layer has dried completely, I'll follow the same steps and add the same details to each piece. This will then show you how you can approach the same painting in different ways, achieving similar results with slightly different styles and finishes. To start, I'm using my Princeton Oval Wash brush and applying a light wash of Permanent Rose. Since we're working with the layering technique, we need to let the first layer dry completely before moving on to the next. Whilst we wait for this layer to dry, let's begin working on the wet on wet technique. Start with the same colour, Permanent Rose, and while the area is still wet, add a touch of Crimson Hue to the top centre to create a deeper, richer colour. Next, take some intense green and outline the entire edge of the leaf, still working while the paper is wet. I also added a bit of Viridian Hue to further define the edge. Finally, blend the reds and the greens together to create a smooth, seamless transition. Now let's move on to the negative painted leaf. For the first step, we will start with a light wash of permanent rose for painting in the vein. The next layer will involve a deeper red, but I'm going to let this section dry first to prevent the colours from bleeding. Returning to our layered leaf, I now take the intense green to outline the leaf, gradually working towards the centre. Be sure to leave space for the red that will be added later. Once this layer is dry, I apply some crimson hue to the centre, working outward from the vein. Be careful not to paint over the vein, as we want to preserve it as a lighter highlight. Let this layer dry completely as well. Now we can return to our negative leaf. Using crimson hue, we'll paint the next section in a deeper red. Notice how I'm intentionally leaving the white speckled areas untouched. As we discussed earlier, this technique relies on painting around the lighter shapes to define them. This is key to successful negative painting. Just a quick recap now, all of our leaf bases are ready for the final steps. We have the layered, wet on wet, and the negative painting. See how each approach has already created a completely different outcome. The layered is already showing a lot of depth and detail. The wet on wet is showing a more loose blended look, and the negative painting has a block colour almost cartoon-like. For more detail, I'm adding crimson hue to the centre area along the main vein. Then using intense green, I start layering to add more depth. You can see I've almost created a shadow effect on the bottom right area of the leaf. After letting this further layer dry, I add some hooker's green and light hooker's green to bring out more vibrant tones along the leaf's edge. I decided to outline the veins to give the illusion that they're popping out of the page. I'll be using this same style on each of the leaves, and I'll also add tiny veins like those you can see when looking very closely at a caladium leaf. Once I've completed all the finer details, I'll grab my gouache paints. I'll be using the opaque white for the white speckles on the leaf. Traditionally, gouache isn't used in watercolour painting, but I must admit I love being able to add light details at the end, such as highlights or brighter sections. Personally, it makes the process more enjoyable, as I don't need to overthink every single step. If using gouache paints isn't your preference, there are other ways to preserve the light areas of your painting. One option being the negative painting technique shown previously, and another applying masking fluid. Do keep in mind though that gouache is opaque, so it will sit on top of the watercolours as a solid, vibrant colour. Now, as you can see, we've moved back onto the wet on wet style base. Because we previously painted over the lighter areas of the vein and the speckles, I'm now going to use the gouache paint here as well. I've chosen the shell pink for the vein. As mentioned earlier, I'm also outlining the veins on each leaf and adding those tiny vein details. Looking at both leaves side by side, they're now beginning to share similarities, though the wet on wet leaf still retains a much looser, softer base with that distinct fluid feel. Finishing with the negative painting leaf, you can really see how different this one looks compared to the others. I'm now painting the final layer of the leaf, which is the green. I'll use a mix of all the greens to fill the last remaining space, carefully avoiding the reds and the white speckled areas. And then the last touches being those tiny veins and the outlines. Exploring each of these watercolour techniques, layering, wet on wet and the negative painting has shown how uniquely they can transform the look and feel of a subject, even when working with the same shapes and colours. The layered leaf demonstrates control, precision and depth. Each stage builds upon the last, giving us a rich colour, clear structure and a strong sense of form. This method requires patience, but it allows for a beautiful and gradual build-up of detail and intensity. In contrast, the wet on wet technique creates a much softer, looser result. Colours blend and bleed organically, giving the painting a dreamier, more fluid appearance. Finally, the negative painted leaf stands out as the most visually different. This method focuses on painting around shapes rather than filling them in. It's an effective way to highlight lighter elements and create dramatic contrast, especially when combined with bold colours. It's amazing how using the same colours and shapes can create completely different looks just by changing your technique. Which one is your favourite? Let me know below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next tutorial. Until next time, happy painting!